Okay, so we are going to begin section 4, section 1 of chapter 4, called Geography and Egypt. Okay, so the main ideas are over here to the left. Let me just shrink this a little bit. Okay, Egypt was called the gift of the Nile because the Nile River was so important. 2, civilization developed after people began farming along the Nile. 3, strong kings unified all of Egypt. And the big idea, the water and fertile soils of the Nile River allowed a great civilization to develop in Egypt. I'm going to skip to building background. Okay, building background. Like the rivers of Mesopotamia, the narrow valley of the Nile River in Egypt also provided fertile land that drew people to live there. The culture that developed in ancient Egypt was more stable and long lasting than those in Mesopotamia. The gift of the Nile. Geography played a key role in the development of Egyptian civilization. The Nile River brought life to Egypt and allowed it to thrive. The river was so important to people in this region that a Greek historian named Herodotus called Egypt the gift of the Nile. Location and physical features. The Nile is the longest river in the world. It begins in Central Africa and runs north through Egypt to the Mediterranean Sea, a distance of over 4,000 miles. The civilization of ancient Egypt developed along a 750-mile stretch of the Nile. Ancient Egypt included two regions, a southern region and a northern region. The southern region was called Upper Egypt. It was so named because it was located upriver in relation to the Nile's flow. Lower Egypt, the northern region, was located downriver. The Nile sliced through the desert of Upper Egypt. There it created a fertile river valley about 13 miles wide. On either side of the Nile lay hundreds of miles of bleak desert lands. So what they mean by that is this is Lower Egypt right here, and this is Upper Egypt. It seems like it would be flip-flopped, but it's in relation to the flow of the river. The river flows from Upper Egypt down into Lower Egypt, into the Nile Delta, and then the Mediterranean Sea. That's why this is called Lower Egypt. Okay, as you can see on the map, the Nile flowed through rocky, hilly land south of Egypt. At several points, this rough terrain caused cataracts or rapids to form. The first cataract, located 720 miles south of the Mediterranean Sea, marked the southern border of Upper Egypt. Five more cataracts lay farther south. These cataracts made sailing on that portion of the Nile very difficult. In Lower Egypt, the Nile divided into several branches that fanned out and flowed into the Mediterranean Sea. These branches formed a delta, a triangle-shaped area of land made from soil deposited by a river. In ancient times, swamps and marshes covered much of the Nile Delta. Some two-thirds of Egypt's fertile farmland was located in the Nile Delta. The floods of the Nile. Because little rain fell in the region, most of Egypt was desert. Each year, however, rainfall far to the south of Egypt into the highlands of East Africa caused the Nile to flood. The Nile's floods were easier to predict than those of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers in Mesopotamia. Almost every year, the Nile flooded Upper Egypt in midsummer and Lower Egypt in the fall. The Nile's flooding coated the land around it with a rich silt. As in Mesopotamia, the silt made the soil ideal for farming. The silt also made the land a dark color. That is why Egyptians called their country the Black Land. They called the dry, lifeless desert beyond the river valley the Red Land. Each year, Egyptians eagerly awaited the flooding of the Nile. For them, the river's flooding were a life giving miracle. Without the floods, people never could have farmed in Egypt. Civilization develops in Egypt. The Nile provided both water and fertile soil for farming. Over time, scattered farms grew into villages and then cities. Eventually, an Egyptian civilization developed. Increased food production. Hunter gatherers first moved into the Nile Valley more than 12,000 years ago. They found plants, wild animals, and fish there to eat. In time, these people learned how to farm and they settled along the Nile. By 4500 BC, farmers living in small villages grew wheat and barley. As in Mesopotamia, farmers in Egypt developed an irrigation system. Unlike farmers in Mesopotamia, however, Egyptian farmers did not need to build basins for storing water. The Egyptians simply built a series of canals to direct the river's flow and carry water to their fields. The Nile provided Egyptian farmers with an abundance of food. In addition to watering their crops, the Nile allowed farmers to raise animals. Farmers in Egypt grew wheat, barley, fruit, and vegetables. They also raised cattle and sheep. The river provided many types of fish, and hunters trapped wild geese and ducks along its banks. Like the Mesopotamians, the Egyptians enjoyed a varied diet. Two kingdoms. In addition to a stable food supply, Egypt's location offered another advantage. It had natural barriers that made it hard to invade Egypt. The desert to the west was too big and harsh to cross. To the north, the Mediterranean Sea kept many enemies away. More desert lands and the Red Sea to the east provided protection against invasions as well. In addition, cataracts in the Nile made it difficult for invaders to sail in from the south. Protected from invaders, the villages of Egypt grew. Wealthy farmers emerged as village leaders, and strong leaders gained control over several villages. By 3200 BC, the villages had grown, banded together, and developed into two kingdoms. One kingdom was called Lower Egypt, and the other was called Upper Egypt. Each kingdom had its own capital city where its ruler was based. The capital of Lower Egypt was located in the northwest Nile Delta at a town called Pei. There, wearing the red crown that symbolized his authority, the king of Lower Egypt ruled. The capital city of Upper Egypt was called Nekhen. It was located in the west bank on the Nile. In the southern kingdom, the king wore a cone-shaped white crown. For centuries, Egyptians referred to their country as the Two Lands. Kings unify Egypt. According to tradition, around 3100 BC, Menes rose to power in Upper Egypt. Some historians think Menes is a myth and that his accomplishments were really those of other ancient kings named Aha, Scorpion, or Narmer. Menes wanted to unify Upper and Lower Egypt. His armies invaded and took control of Lower Egypt. He then married a princess from Lower Egypt to strengthen his control over the newly unified country. Menes wore both the white crown of Upper Egypt and the red crown of Lower Egypt to symbolize his leadership over the two kingdoms. Later, he combined the two crowns into a double crown. Many historians consider Menes to be Egypt's first pharaoh, the title used by the rulers of Egypt. The title pharaoh means great house. Menes also founded Egypt's first dynasty, or series of rulers from the same family. Menes built a new capital city at the southern tip of the Nile Delta. The city was later named Memphis. For centuries, Memphis was the political and cultural center of Egypt. Many government offices were located there, and the city bustled with artistic activity. The first dynasty lasted for about 200 years. Rulers who came after Menes also wore the double crown to symbolize their rule over Upper and Lower Egypt. And this is a picture of the crown. This one, the white crown, is Upper Egypt, and the red crown was Lower Egypt. So for a long time, it was two separate kingdoms, but Menes combined them together, okay, into what's called the double crown right here. They extended Egyptian territory southward along the Nile and into southwest Asia. Eventually, however, rivals arose to challenge the first dynasty for power. These challengers took over Egypt and established the second dynasty. Okay, the summary and review. As you have read, ancient Egypt began in the fertile Nile River Valley. Two kingdoms developed. The two kingdoms were later united under one ruler, and Egyptian territory grew. In the next section, you will learn how Egypt continued to grow and change under later rulers in a period known as the Old Kingdom.